Kevin Rubio. Thank you for doing this interview.
Absolutely, Chris Gore.
Well, let's just launch right into it. I mean, you get the
Sure.
sense of what I'm doing here. So I knew you before, way before.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, like the 90s. I mean, probably my biggest memory of you, because I knew you around and whatnot, was, of course, seeing Troops.
Yeah.
Troops, that was a moment at San Diego Comic-Con when that thing played. And if you don't know what Troops is like, I'm just saying this for anyone if they listen.
Sure.
Troops was probably, I mean, not the first fan film, but one of the greatest when you do a list of fan films, which is sort of like it's cops, but with stormtroopers on Tatooine, and it ties stuff in, and it's clever, and the effects are incredible and remarkable. I mean, at the time, it was like, these are effects that were just on the level with Hollywood at that time. And this was this 90, what year was this?
That was 97, because what it was the 20th anniversary of Star Wars.
Right.
And at the Comic-Con that year, the themes were the 100th anniversary of Dracula.
Wow.
The 20th anniversary of Star Wars, and the salute to the independent filmmaker. So I had 2 of the 3 boxes checked off for that one.
But Kevin, obviously a different experience for you, but I just showed up like, support my friend Kevin. This will be kind of cool. And that thing played. There were gasps, howls of laughter, eruption of applause at the end with a show it again. Show it again. Do you remember that? Like,
oh yeah.
I mean, you couldn't. I don't know if you played it 2 or 3 times, at least twice.
We played it twice.
Yeah.
We played it at the beginning and we played it at the end.
And dude, it changed things. I mean, I remember writing about that for Film Threat, and then also Entertainment Weekly did a story about it.
Well, you were a big part of. Yeah, you were a big part of the launch of it, because you wanted to initially put it up on Film Threat, but you didn't have the bandwidth. And then it was you that connected me with the Force.net.
Force.net, and then also, I think, was it Total Movie Magazine also put it on one of their discs?
They did. Total Movie put it on their inaugural disc.
Ironically edited by Gary Whitta, who went on to write Rogue One. That's how I knew. I knew Gary from the video game, Gary Whitta from the video game industry, and then he from that went to editing Total Movie, and I wrote for Total Movie Magazine, and then he, was just writing screenplays, and obviously has had a lot of success. But I knew you before G4. I started working there in 2005.
That was about the time I started.
Yeah, March of 2005. I was on 3 episodes of The Screensavers, and then I don't know. So what I'm asking, my long-winded way of asking you the question, your background and who you are, and then how you got to G4 pack the show, and then what your role was, because I don't remember when you worked there. All I remember is like, hey, Kevin, what are you doing? Like, I just saw you there.
Yeah.
Which was really funny, but anyways, but I'm going to mute myself, and if you could just tell your sort of journey from the secret origin of Kevin Rubio.
Secret origin.
Yeah.
Well, after Troops, and for the young people, because the film is now 24 years old. When we say it's Star Wars with cops, we mean there was a TV show back on Fox that was the first kind of reality-based show that followed police around from different cities. So it's been off the air for a while, but that's what we were parodying. It was a show called Cops. And after the attention with Troops, and it appearing in magazines and newspapers, and me getting a lot of press and ink, I became Flavor of the Month in Hollywood for about 4 months. Got myself an agent and lawyers and the whole bit, and started in earnest doing developing features and shows, got on the runway a few times. But it's hard to get a show off the ground. I did 3 pilots in 4 years, 5 years. And about the time that I was doing G4, because there's not a lot of money in development, I had become a writer-producer of promotions and advertising. And I started at Kids WB, which at the time was the upstart animated network. And after that, I kind of moved around to almost every network that there is. I did stuff for ABC, NBC, MTV, all of the Disney channels, including I launched their soap opera channel because I happen to know the whole saga of Luke and Laura from General Hospital. That was my foray into that. They asked me if I knew anything about Luke and Laura, and after I was done with Disney, I went over to ABC and I was doing their upfronts, and I worked at ABC for about a year. And the head of promos at ABC moved over to G4. And so she asked me to come over and do promotions. And I launched Arrested Development on G4. So if you were around at the time and you saw an Arrested Development promo, that was usually mine. And I remember at the time, Ben Levine was my editor, and I was not aware of this, but when I came in, I guess the 2 people above me, like in charge of the departments, were both on vacation. And so the only firewall between myself and the president, who watched every promo, was Jane, who hired me. And so I was doing Arrested Development, and we were getting bought off, like version 2, sometimes version 1. And I remember Ben, asking me, how are you doing this? I never get something passed. And, saying, well, it's not me, it's the show. I mean, you can't really screw up Arrested Development. And then the 2 middlemen came back from vacation, and that's when the version started to tick up to version 24, version 37, and it got to the point where it was beyond ridiculous, and it was what I call frame fucking, and it was funny. Each exec thought they knew what the president wanted, and it was completely opposite of each other. And so, me being a bit of an asshole, with each version, because I knew it went to the president of the network, I would put in the lower third, Chiron, per so-and-so's notes, version whatever. And and this as the version kept upticking, I both of the middlemen came down and were saying, you don't have to put our names in there. And I said, I actually do, because I need to keep it straight for myself, because each of you are giving me contrary notes, and this is my way of knowing whose notes I'm addressing. So they couldn't refute it, but they knew I was fucking with them. And so it came down to where the president finally said, leave Kevin alone. He had it at version 5.
First of all, let me compliment you. That is brilliant. I've heard of ways of getting around notes. I feel like so much creative content is noted to death. You hear that. I've never heard of that technique as a way to get around it. My way of getting around notes is always just to turn stuff in late, to come up with some excuse to turn in, whether it's, a piece of writing or whatever. It's just like, if it's late, well, and the deadline is here, there's only a finite amount of time to actually give notes. So that's an end around, but that way, oh my God, is great. Boy, I got to compliment you. That's great, dude. the version 37 per so-and-so's notes, very clever.
Well, the end result of that was that when my freelance contract was up, they didn't renew it.
Oh no. Well,
but that brought me to G4, and that brought me to Attack of the Show. Well, I went from promos to Attack of the Show, but we can still talk about promos if you want.
Of course. Well, no, I think that to me might be the best advice I've ever heard about working in a promo department, would be just to use that technique. Let's talk about Attack of the Show, how you got there, what your role was, and then what I want to ask you. It's going to give me a minute to explain it.
Sure.
Is, I'm looking for anecdotes about milestones related to the show. There are key milestones related to the show, right? The first day of the show being called Attack of the Show, right? There's Sarah Lane's departure, right? Mm-hmm. There's Olivia Munn's first day. There's just sort of milestones or things that you consider for the history of the show were, for fans, that's a date that you would mark. Were you the reason I'm telling you this now, that you can kind of get in your brain, what some of the things that you want to talk about, oh yeah, I was there for that, and you're thinking it's just a regular day on the show, it's a job, right?
Sure.
But for fans of the show, that was a history making thing, like when Olivia mispronounces, said McHammer instead of MC Hammer, right? That became, I've had several people mention that. But it's interesting when I ask this question, how people mention different things as being a milestone.
Yeah.
So I just want to plant that seed so you can begin to think about what would be I was there on the day that this happened, or I was on set when that happened, or whatever. Because I know in people's jobs, they're not always, in the right place at the right time. But let's talk about how you got to G4, or excuse me, Attack of the Show.
Attack of the Show.
Yeah. I'm going to take myself off because I want to put you
Of course. So. Yeah. Well, with Attack of the Show, my first introduction into it was actually as a guest, and they were interviewing me for my show Troops. And after that, they brought me back on again for what was at the time, I believe that was In the Loop, in which I did an argument with Mark A. Altman regarding what was better, Star Trek or Star Wars. So that was my introduction to Kevin and then Sarah. But after I left the promo department of G4, I segued over into Attack of the Show because they wanted to start up an actual community and feedback with the audience. And so what I was working on, and I don't remember what the title was, but I interacted with viewers online as the show was going on the Attack of the Show website. And so I would give comments and previews during the day as to what was going to be coming up on Attack of the Show, and then I would interact with the audience as the show was going on. Pretty much now what you have here on YouTube, which is your live chat and people interacting, and again, I think YouTube at the time was maybe 2 years old, but that was what brought me into Attack of the Show and how I connected with them. I also wrote segments for them, and we can get to this in greater detail, but I was the head writer for the AEE show and the CES show for 2006, which were the two big extravaganzas for those years, because each show was 2 hours.
Yeah, I think I was there for one of those AEE. I was there for, but yeah, Troops. Okay, so yeah, I do remember you were on Attack of the Show. Like, okay, so do you have that footage? Because now we have to use it.
Oh man, I don't.
I'll bet we can find it.
I mean, I have somewhere in my storage closet, I have discs of Attack of the Show, but it's all my promo stuff.
Right.
You know, it's not my appearances, unfortunately. And then I also did an on-camera segment, once, and I think that's still online. If you go to the G4 website.
I will find the
on YouTube
of you being on Attack of the Show. Back to the other question I asked earlier, in terms of historical anecdotes, memories of that. Can you speak to that, or do you have something?
I was there the year that the iPhone launched, and I remember everybody in the office trying to figure out what the hell it was, because we didn't know it was a phone. We thought it was going to be like another iPod at first, and people were trolling the internet looking for anything, and they were trying to guess what the design was going to be like. And I remember, some people bringing up photographs or renderings of what they thought it was going to look like and what they thought it was going to do. And everybody basically, it was the I guess the equivalent of G4 Super Bowl when Steve Jobs and Apple did that launch, because we were all standing around and covering it and getting ready to delve in and tear everything apart and see what the ramifications would be for his new product. Little did we know.
Well, yeah, and now we're kind of suffering with the consequences. I think it's interesting how it was, from my perspective, a different time.
Yeah.
In the sense that these new technological advances were celebrated, and now I feel like they should all come with a warning, like a pack of cigarettes. You know what I mean? Like, may be addictive and cause societal harm. For real, So, but really, it was G4 kind of paralleled. G4 and Attack of the Show kind of paralleled like all these advances, whether it was like new game systems, new like the iPhone, coming out, and iPad and whatnot, and so gaming and tech, and then even ushering in. Like with Iron Man, right? Like the Marvel movies, I don't think we quite realized the Marvel movies were kind of just beginning to get traction. I mean, G4 ended when Avengers came out, I think in 2012. Am I right?
Yeah. In fact, I remember somebody from G4 put up a meme. It said G4 last broadcast is December 21st, 2012, and this is well played, Mayans. Well played.
Dude, that's awesome. Actually, technically speaking, G4 continued. The last live was then.
Yeah.
But there were tons of pre-recorded shows that were done. It was like a few months before everybody knew the network was ending, and we had recorded a whole bunch of like wraparound bits because they forgot when they canceled the network that they still had contracts with like GameStop and also overseas. So they had to deliver new programming, right? It didn't necessarily have to be live, but new programming had to be delivered. So there was a ton of effort between, and then everyone was given like a severance pay, which was, I think, like 3 months' salary, just as like sort of in compensation for like, hey, you're going to do all this extra work. So actually, technically speaking, even though the show ended, like in 2012, it continued, at least for people overseas and at GameStop, and also it continued through the first quarter of 2013. So people didn't realize that the network was like canceled because it's like, hey, they're new shows.
Yeah.
And it was just sort of, they were like a series of best ofs with wraparounds for the most part. And I know I participated in that because that was part of like your agreement to take the severance was you had to participate in this thing, so it's almost like, hey, they're running it for 3 months anyways. We're getting paid. It was weird. Yeah. But back to my earlier thought. And first of all, that is a great anecdote. It's a great anecdote about the ending. Yeah. But I wonder, like, if you have some of these other that's a great historical anecdote, by the way. No one else has said that one. There's something that I want to ask specifically, you may have been present for.
Yeah.
That when they were they had a contest at G4 to rename screensavers to something else. Mm. One of the names was considered was Game Time, which I think is pretty awful. But Mike Shaw came up with the name Attack of the Show. And so I don't know if you knew that.
No.
But he came up with the name, and then some people were like, that's a terrible name. No, don't call it that. Don't call it Attack of the Show. And then Mike wrote this like essay about why the show needed to be called this. Mm-hmm. And he read it in front of a bunch of people, and they just like, it's like this, we have to be called Attack of the Show. Yeah. It was like that seminal moment of like Batman saying, I shall become a bat, you know? You know what I mean? Like, so, I mean, at least that's the way I would like to play it in the documentary, because everyone that's told that story, like, starts to actually get emotional.
Yeah.
Because they were there when like Mike Shaw like read this, and he sent this memo and then read it at a meeting. And it like was like, it was like a mission statement, you know, it was like a Jerry Maguire when he wrote that mission statement, right? It was like, I know what I need to do now. Like it gave the show a personality and a direction. It wasn't, I don't believe that Attack of the Show was Attack of the Show on day one, with the first episode called Attack of the Show aired, but it evolved really quickly. And I think it really sort of came into its own when Olivia came on board. But I don't know I don't know what your thoughts are, but I'm looking for also like any other where you were witness to or a part of like seminal milestone type events related to the show.
The ones that I was witness to were not ones that were on air. You know, that's the thing. Like when Gavin left to go to do Jimmy Fallon's show. I mean, that was, most people will never even, well, no, because Gavin appeared on the show a couple of times, but you know, it's like him and Vinnie Rutherford, and like you say, like Mike Shaw and Casey Schreiner and Paul. I'm forgetting Paul's last name, but you know, these are just, you could tell when you were in the room with them. I said, okay, these are the guys that are going to change the industry in some shape or form. And all they needed was an environment to do that. And that's kind of, I've been privileged to be part of 3 of those things where it's always some station new with nothing to lose and little money, so they get young people, you know, that don't know it can't be done, and they just turn them loose and they trust them to do the job. And when you do that, it's surprising what comes up. And I know this is about Attack the Show, but the same thing occurred at Fox Kids. You know, it was a group of largely people in their mid-20s who had the #1 children's network in the nation. And that was repeated again at Kids WB. And then when I got to Attack of the Show, it was the same environment in the beginning where, you know, you had all of these kids with energy and ideas, and they were allowed to do them. And when when Gavin left, that was like one of those, not a chink in the armor, but there was just a little dip, in that, oh, now we've all got to kind of pick up the slack. And I think that also started to coincide with once you start getting popular and doing well and affecting the culture, then outsiders start to take notice and they want in. And they say, we want that. And then, so when Comcast came in, I mean, you want to talk about milestones and changes. You could really feel it in the air. First of all, we moved from our location on Pico and Bundy to the locations at Wilshire, where we shared a floor with E. And oh my God, if ever there was a clear delineation of who worked for G4 and who worked for E, you only needed to look at the top of the cubicles and see where all of the robots and toys stopped, and the thick smell of perfume and Axe body spray began. And so, when we talk milestones, that was one of them. And I think another one, and not something that the audience was ever privy to, but of course, when you get absorbed or acquired by a corporation, that comes with a lot of, corporate overhead and CYA and a lot of HR stuff that needs to be done. And the entire staff had an all-day sexual harassment seminar. Now, I don't want to diminish or say that this is not necessary in a workplace. Clearly, in an environment of, post Me Too, there's a lot, to do with that and women feeling comfortable. But the irony is that our sexual harassment seminar took place smack dab in the middle of us shooting the Adult Entertainment Expo. Where, our crews were going out and doing segments on porn star Max Steel. And my task at that point, that very week, I was reviewing dildos. So, and I remember there were a lot of people that weren't, just with disgusted faces. But again, I'm an a-hole and a troublemaker, and I was a freelancer, so I spoke up and basically, when speaking with one of the lawyers who were doing, their job, and I said, look, I sit in a cubicle surrounded by dildos and sex toys, trying to find out which one is the best while I watch porn for an Adult Entertainment Expo that we are going to be broadcasting on this network. So don't tell me about what is sexually inappropriate or insensitive, unless you want to give me my own private office with blackout screens. This is the environment we work in. And the next week, I got my own office with a blackout screen.
Well, yeah, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I remember that sexual harassment training because they showed a segment from SNL with Tom Brady.
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah.
It was funny. It was like, this is funny. Because it was about, I mean, it wasn't mocking sexual harassment, it was just showing.
No.
But it was from SNL when the show was funny. And wow, I just remember it was sort of like for especially for the G4 people, it was pretty unnecessary. I mean, everybody was very professional. It was I can't recall any issues that I was made aware of ever about that. So
and it's such a cliche to throw around, but it really was a family, and it was because it was all of these. you and I were probably the oldest people at that network. You know, if you don't count the execs.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was. Going back, it's funny, these milestones that you're mentioning, while you may not think they're amazing. This is like perfect for the doc, because it's that kind of behind the scenes. It's not a milestone that was necessarily present for the viewing audience.
Yeah.
Tell me a little bit about like Gavin Purcell. I remember I met him in a strange way, and I'll tell that story I'll tell that story in the doc, but can you tell me your impression of Gavin and what he was like and how he ran things and why he caught the eye of Jimmy Fallon to produce the Jimmy Fallon show?
Gavin was, if he wasn't internally, externally, he was very assured and knew his capabilities. And the confidence that he displayed and the professionalism for a person of his age just immediately made him disarming, but also attractive, and made you want to say, sure, what do you need? Because again, he wasn't told no. He was willing to push things and take risks. And it's like, what do you have to lose? Where other people who maybe had been in the business longer had and might have been burnt by taking chances, would have been more cautious. And one of the things, the reason Jimmy was a fan of our show, he came on the show several times, and that was why when he got called to do late night, he wanted Gavin. And I recall, Gavin taking off back east to do the interviews, and we knew something was going on, but we weren't quite sure what it was. And Lauren Michaels asked Gavin, what would you do to change late night? And Gavin's reply was, I would get them off of the couch. And that's exactly what he did. If you looked at Jimmy's show, and even when Gavin went on to the Tonight Show, he got the celebs involved in, these goofy segments that had their origins on Attack of the Show. And it was just let's get here and let's have some fun, and let's not worry about promoting whatever film you're here to promote. Let's do something that you're not going to do on any other late night show.
It's so funny that you say that. I remember when I first heard Gavin was going to Jimmy Fallon, and then the show finally launched. That I was like, oh, these are like Attack of the Show bits. He was recycling. I mean, they weren't exactly, but they were like, oh, this was so Attack of the Show.
It was the spirit of Attack of the Show.
Precisely. God, that's such a good, I don't know, Kevin, you're giving me gold here.
Oh, good.
Other thing I want you to think about, in addition to milestones, if you in the course of our conversation, if you're like, I'm asking questions, you're like, oh, wait, and you've got another one, let me know. But I also want to talk to you about what you consider to be sort of the best moments of Attack of the Show. And because I'll say this, when I say best moments, it's like, where a comedy bit worked, or this was funny, or like this sort of blew up, right? Like people were talking about it. There's also what I would consider to be what one might call the worst moments, but when it was the best, it was always great. And when it was actually the worst, meaning like a mistake happened, it was also kind of the best.
Oh, well, and I'm not gonna. I don't want to sound like I'm throwing Olivia Munn under the bus, because she clearly brings, something that we didn't have on the show. But it was, when people ask me, how would you describe Olivia? I said, she'd be the last person to get the joke, but she'd laugh anyway. And so, like, whenever she didn't get something, like the McHammer stuff, the expressions on Kevin's face and him trying to hold back and then what he would come up with to get out of that were brilliant. I can remember several times after a show him walking by my desk, and I said, "Well, you were doing a lot of heavy lifting today." But so those were fun. I think the best things and the ones I always looked forward to were the Comic-Con musicals numbers that they would parody for the costume show. And it's been a while since I've been to a Comic-Con costume show, and I think it's largely been taken over by Ashley Epstein and her fashion show versus a costume show. But back in the old days, when they used to have the costume show for Comic-Con, a lot of fans, in addition to their cosplay, would actually perform some sort of a sketch. And so G4 did several of those in that spirit. And they actually had a running, dramatic storyline going through it. So and that was, I think, written by Casey and Paul. And I tell you, those two guys, and Casey's gone on he's founded the Modern Hikers website and has written several books about hiking here in LA, which is and all over the country. And it's funny because he was the most sedentary guy in the world when he started working at G4, and then just got out and started hiking one day and got hooked. And now he's probably the foremost expert for California, but the nation as well. And Paul, and God, I'm so sorry, Paul, I'm forgetting your last name at this moment, but those two could have been writers on The Daily Show. They could have been writers on Last Week Tonight or Saturday Night Live, and have a shelf full of Emmys because they were just that funny. And I agree. Those Comic-Con musical sketches were probably the highlight. I always look forward to them doing that. And then also Robot Romantico was probably my favorite running sketch, and I miss Robot Romantico.
It's funny, and I will say this, just so you know, is that part of the reason I'm asking you about best and worst moments is if I can hear you speak about it, I can, as a doc filmmaker, can show it. Right?
Sure, of course.
It's fair use. So anything you mention, it's like, oh, now I can use that. Now I can because you mention it. So so if there's anything else that you recall, please bring it up. The other thing I want to ask is about your impressions of the hosts, the people that were on the show. For me, it was really interesting because my experiences with television previous to Attack of the Show I didn't consider them great. What I didn't like about them was I always felt that other networks were trying to make me a hip, cool version of me, which actually was not me. I was a guy that wore t-shirts and jeans pretty much every day, wore Converse sneakers and read comic books and was into movies. So, and video games, all that stuff, all the stuff that Attack of the Show covered. So I was into all that. So, and I felt like there was a version of me that was being portrayed on television by other networks that wasn't accurate. And my love with G4 was that they allowed me to be myself on camera for the very first time. Yeah. It was like I part of my agreement with Gavin was that I could wear whatever t-shirts I wanted. So I would wear I would wear stuff that I liked. I would wear Film Threat t-shirts. I would wear friends of mine that were in bands, they'd give me shirts and I would wear them on the show. So, but I wonder if you might go through the main hosts and your interactions or
I will, and I have a good story too.
Okay, good. So sort of all the main hosts, hey, with us, it's just I know you, you know what I mean? It's
sure.
I'm but if you want to go through and tell me whether it's Sarah Lane or Allison Hayslip or anyone, if you could tell some stories. Or how do you
Yeah,
impression?
Zach, and I'm forgetting Zach's last name right now.
Zach Selwyn. Zach
Selwyn.
And it was like, and Paul, his last name is Bonanno.
Paul Bonanno. Yeah,
Paul
okay.
Bonanno.
Paul Bonanno. Paul
Yeah.
Bonanno.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He is an
You know,
interesting story.
the thing is when you talk about hosts, with I think the exception of Olivia Munn, everybody else who was a host or a correspondent, well, Sarah Underwood also. Sarah we brought in as a former Playboy playmate, but again, not an on-camera personality, not somebody who had desires to host a show or become a correspondent. Kevin started off on Screensavers. He was a production assistant. Zach Selwyn was a musician. When Casey and Paul would come in, I mean, they were writers. Blair Butler was a writer producer for the show, and it was just like, hey, you really know a lot about comics. Why don't you do the comics section? So that environment was not people that were posturing or trying to be anything than what they were. I mean, oftentimes, whatever outfit they wore on camera was the outfit they came in with. It wasn't a wardrobe thing. Yeah, you had makeup, or maybe sometimes Kevin would change his t-shirt, but it was nothing different, or it wasn't like he was putting on a mask and being something that he wasn't. Everybody that you saw on there, for the most part, was who they were off camera. There was no persona that was put on.
100%. Blair Butler actually, I think, was in a way like she was a writer, stand-up comedy, but my impression of her is that she was a little uncomfortable with herself being looked on as like sort of a sex symbol. And same thing with Morgan Webb. They were like, these were intelligent women who knew their area of expertise. And so like the idea of being like adored, for their looks, I think didn't sit well with either of them, on that side. But it was also like my first experience working in television where the people that were there didn't need to be produced because they knew their stuff. Like, I had a producer, but my producer was just like, you have to do 4 movies. We have 5 minutes. You're doing these 3 films. It's like, okay, but I always would try to throw in an indie or some small movie to give a broad and diverse range. And in any case, like I knew that stuff. And like, if you went to everybody, they were kind of experts in what they were talking about. And my experience with television previously was not that. My experience in TV was like people there's the cat, which always is going to show up when it happens.
I'm cat sitting.
There you go. But yeah, like that was not my experience before. And I would say a lot of television is still that way, where it's just like you've got someone who's a good broadcaster and they're good on TV and they're good looking enough for TV or whatever that means anymore. Yeah. But it's like, and then they're like, have a producer kind of feeding them what to say. Whereas like I would say the majority of people at G4 like knew their stuff. Yeah. And then it was a matter of like, well, how do we, get you to be comfortable on TV part? That was something I struggled with. But
the classic example was the most recent online broadcast of Star Trek Celebration, where the 2 hosts did not know shit. And I'm sorry, lovely ladies, but they never should have been hosting Star Trek. And in our age now of gatekeeping and everybody like really quick to test your real nerd cred, anybody who appeared on G4, with maybe the exception of Olivia, you never questioned their nerd cred. They came on and they knew what the hell they were talking about, and it didn't matter what the subject was, because we always catered the person to whatever the subject matter was. And like you're saying, with Morgan and with Blair, I mean, they knew their shit in a variety of different topics. And I don't know if to a male audience, and I don't know what our breakdown was, but I know it was mostly male, but it was because of people like Morgan and Blair and even Carrie Underwood, who brought women, a women audience, and then later Jessica Chobot, who we got off of of a submission. She sent in a photo of her licking her I think it was her Xbox at the time.
It was the PS4 or
the PS4.
No, PS3.
PS3. She said, and it was like, okay, we got to bring this girl in, and look at she's now hosting 2 shows on the Discovery Channel, and her husband Blair Herter from MTV. Blair started out as I think he was on the Real World or the Road Show, Real Road Rules or whatever. But he became
Road Rules, yeah,
Road Rules. But he became a writer producer, and again knew his shit. And for me personally, I think they are quite possibly the coolest parents on the internet, and they give me hope for the future. Because I love them. And let me tell you, a milestone and host that has to also do with host. Carrie Keegan. One day, all of the producers at the beginning of each show, when you're doing a daily news magazine show, you have a meeting in the morning, basically to go over the topics of the day, what's coming up, what we need to cover, what shows are going to be featured, and any last minute problems or changes that we have. And for our show In the Loop, which was kind of a roundtable discussion of the general topics of the day, we had somebody drop out. And so I don't know if it was Gavin at that time or if it was Vinny, but they went around the table and said, we have a cancellation. We need somebody for In the Loop. Preferably, can we get a female? And would it kill us if, she knew her stuff and, was good for camera? And so I, having at that time, again, been the guy who was interacting with people online, I spent most of my days trolling the internet looking for stuff. And I had happened upon a website called No Good TV. And Carrie Keegan was the owner, proprietor, and producer of this piece. And it was... she was conducting interviews that were at the time more bawdy and blue than what normally would be allowed. Nowadays, you can go on Conan, or not Conan anymore, but you can go on Stephen Colbert or The Tonight Show or Jimmy Kimmel, and you can curse up a storm and they will bleep it. But prior to that, out of the way, kitty, that just wasn't seen in interviews. And so it would take a lot of celebrities off guard. But Carrie was one of those people that, and in the spirit of Carrie, I will say it, just didn't give a fuck. But she also knew her shit. And so I thought Carrie would be absolutely great as a guest for Attack of the Shows In the Loop. And so I did a cold call to her. And of course, I'm sure anybody doing a cold call to an exceptionally beautiful young lady, there would be questions. Luckily, I had the moniker of, "Hi, I'm Kevin Rubio, and I'm a segment producer for Attack of the Show, and I would like to book your client." So that's what got Carrie into Attack of the Show for the very first time.
And I can attest to the fact that she's exceptional. I would run into her on the junket circuit. Mm-hmm. She was very popular. because she came in and she got away with so much.
Yeah.
And it was so, I mean, her comedy chops were just amazing. So,
and again, guys. Well, obviously, the first thing you're going to be drawn to with Carrie, and I'm not telling tales out of school. She'll be the first to admit it too. Are her boobs? They're just unavoidable, and she's an incredibly attractive woman. But this incredibly attractive woman started a digital empire before there was a YouTube, and had over 100 million followers in the age prior to Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and TikTok, and she built up a media empire where she still to this day, she owns some sweet real estate smack dab in the middle of Beverly Hills. And if anybody knows the California real estate market, that's expensive stuff. And she's the CEO of a media company.
That's awesome. What, again, if some anecdotes are best or worst or anything that comes to mind, feel free to segue into it.
Yeah.
But I want to ask, I've been going through all the footage of the show.
Yeah.
What surprised me most is how blue the show was, how suggestive, sometimes sexy, over the top. There were double entendres where kind of, that was constant. And I'm watching a lot of this stuff, and I'm not only cringing at stuff I'm seeing other people say, but things that I said. And I'm looking and going, I wonder if Attack of the Show could be done today, or how you could do it, because there are, in any given hour of that show, something that would be considered a cancelable offense today. So my question is, what are your thoughts on that? And can Attack of the Show be done today?
As with anything, context is key. And I've said it before in this interview, but we were like family, and you're a little, you put your guard down around family. You're a little more open around family, and you're definitely more blue around family. So where people will look at projects or broadcasts that we did back then today and think, ooh, that doesn't, I don't know if that would fly. It was always in the spirit of fun and having a good time, and never any malice, towards workers or coworkers or hosts. If we had arguments and frustrations on the shows, it was never amongst us. It was always, corporate, and what we felt they were doing to the integrity of the show, and how they were basically destroying it before our eyes. And when you ask about, could it be done today? I don't think so, but I don't think it couldn't be done today because we were blue, or because we did things that now would be seen inappropriate. I just don't know if that exact show could be done because of the unique combination of people involved. There's the adage, lightning never strikes twice in the same place. But lightning does strike people more than once, and there's a guy famously known as Roy Sullivan, who was coined by Guinness World Book of Records as the human lightning conductor. He had been struck by lightning 7 times and lived to survive. And my point of bringing that up is that it's the same person. And now, as we speak, Attack of the Show is launching again, and it has some of the same people involved. Blair Herter, who was a segment producer, I believe now is the guy running the show. Kevin Pereira is coming back, and I believe they brought back some of the other writers. And while I don't think the same show will ever be recreated. I believe that this show has a chance of having the same energy and the same fun and the same possibilities to be something that we've never seen before.
I love that. You couldn't have put it better. I want to pivot and ask to the end of the show.
Yeah.
The cancellation. Were you
No.
there? Oh, okay, cool. Well, then maybe you don't really have perspective on it, but
I don't. I mean, as a person watching from the outside, it really saddened me. And, and I remember I would talk to the people that were still there, and it was like a dirge, man. And it just hurt me every time because I knew what it had once been. And it was sad because it wasn't abrupt. It was really a slow limp, to the finish. So, I mean that was my perspective watching from the outside, and I'm almost glad I wasn't there because I think I would not have curbed my tongue, and I probably would have been let go prior to going off the air.
Well, I almost got let go a couple times, but I think they just forgot about me because I'm only on like once or twice a week. I would be on, but I want to talk about just fandom and how fandom has changed. Kevin, you're very, and have been, as have I, very, very embedded in nerd culture from, going to San Diego Comic-Con, from being involved with people. We have mutual friends with Mark A. Altman and Robert Meyer Burnett. So I've known you beyond the geek cred, but you've seen the culture of nerddom. And I believe that in some way, when I first started on Attack of the Show, it's one of those things where you wouldn't necessarily admit how many long boxes of comics that you have. And it was strange to me that in tracking with from 2005 through 2012, there was definitely a shift of nerd culture becoming mainstream. It was the rise of Marvel movies. It was, arguably the best Batman trilogy we may ever see, right? Yeah. With Christopher Nolan's Dark Knight films, it from 2005 through 2012, this rise of geek culture, and then things kind of fandom has changed. Now we're, and I don't agree with this because I'll just to give you a little bit more, and I'll shut up and get your thoughts, but there's a divide in fandom now that I've never quite ever seen. I mean, I would always disagree. We would sit, and I know you've been a part of these discussions.
Sure.
It'd be Robert Meyer Burnett, and there'd be Darren Doctorman, and yourself, and Mark Hoffman, and myself, and other people, sort of Algonquin table, right? And what are you talking about? Blah 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 blah. And you argue, and that's half the fun is arguing. And to me, part of even the whole nerd is just defend your position. Let's debate and discuss. But ostracized. And now I'm seeing where you've got whole groups of people, because they liked or disliked a certain Star Wars film, are now it's becoming a divide like I've never seen it. Fandom, I believe fandom is fractured. And in a sad way. So can you give some perspective on how fandom has changed from the Attack of the Show started to where fandom is now? How have things evolved and changed? What are your perspectives on it, especially as someone who has been there from the beginning and you've witnessed stuff? Guy, and I'm sorry, this is very long.
No, I understand.
I did after The Last Jedi came out, which I did not like Force Awakens. Last Jedi was oh, there's hope. Maybe this trilogy does have something mapped out that will be interesting. And I liked The Last Jedi, but then
I love The Last Jedi.
And then come to find out, people really dislike The Last Jedi. But not only and I'm fine with it. I don't care if people dislike it. But what I'm saying is the people that dislike it have very passionate arguments. And I agree with some of their criticisms. A lot of the criticisms are pretty accurate, actually.
Sure.
I think it speaks back to they had no plan at the beginning. We didn't know that until we got to the third film that shit the bed, in my opinion. The worst Star Wars movie ever made is the last one.
Yeah.
But what my point is that I've never seen, and never in the history of like being around nerd culture, people being attacked for their opinions.
Yeah.
And so we went from from 2005 to nerds becoming cool to nerddom and everything geek becoming mainstream and part of like mainstream pop culture, where, you know, my mom in Michigan is aware of new Marvel movies that are coming out, to like this divide where, you know, it's like you have to choose a side now for everything. So I want to get your perspective on how Attack of the Show and G4 started played into the rise and maybe the fracture of geek culture.
I think for the first time you had a network dedicated solely to that particular segment of people. And, you know, today we're talking about the importance of inclusion, and that G4 and Attack of the Show for that particular generation was the first spark of inclusion on a mass scale that showed people, oh, there are people like me out there who like what I like, and it's okay to like that. Not only are there people out there, but there are people on the air right now talking back to me who are like me. I think, you know, more people could see themselves in Blair and Zach and Kevin, maybe not necessarily Olivia, because Olivia is a little bit in the class by herself, but they could say, "Oh, well, I'm exactly like Kevin. You know, I'm a nerd guy who knows tech, and yet, you know, he seems kind of cool. Maybe I've got this all wrong." And so I think that was the crack that opened the door for people to come in and say, "Hey, it's okay to do this." Now, when you combine it with nerd culture, geek culture, segueing into and becoming pop culture, once it, by the very definition, becoming popular, then it becomes a money-making incentive. And so everybody wants to get in on it. And it's like all of a sudden people crashing a party that were never there before. That does not mean to say that these people were not geeks, but maybe because they didn't feel they were represented, or because they were not able to freely admit to others around them because of their surroundings that they liked comic books, that they didn't come in. But when they came in, there was there was a questioning by those people that had already been taking a beating, if you will, for years on end. The guys that had had the sand kicked in their face since they were 10, and saying, "Well, what right have you to be here?" They had rights to be there. They just weren't the first ones through the door. And I don't necessarily think that because they weren't the first doesn't mean that their opinions or that their passion for something wasn't as equal. They just maybe didn't realize that there were others like them until that point.
That's great. It's going to be one of the threads that is being explored in the documentary is how fandom has evolved and changed since that era, which I think I really feel Attack of the Show emerged into a golden age. And I think right now we're kind of, we're going through something is what I'm saying. Well, probably exacerbated by, current environment, To
your question as to what was the change, why are we here where we are today? I don't think that what we did on G4 has as much an effect of what's happening in today's environment. I think that what's happening in today's environment has more to do with the advance of social media as a whole in general. And I say this from time to time. It's ironic that in the birth of social media, everyone has forgotten how to be social. Because we've gone from people who are observers into people that are participants, and we've gone from looking up to looking into our laps all the time and not looking at the world around us. And we hide, for the most part, behind screens and usernames and built up masks and identities where our words have no consequence or actions because we do not see on the other end. We simply type something off without thinking because we feel, well, what we say matters. We are important. And that is fostered by algorithms that put you in a constant biased loop of giving you things that only you like and that only you want to hear and see. And when that happens, you have a false sense of self and a false sense of the world around you. And so when someone comes up to challenge those opinions with something to back it, you don't have the tools or the wherewithal as to how to handle that. Because to admit something that is wrong, because you're on such a closed, small world, even though you think that the internet is open to you, to admit something was wrong would literally destroy the world of people that have grown up in the social internet age. You've muted yourself, Chris.
Sorry about that. Yeah, I it really makes me sad because I feel like I lived through probably what was the best time ever for nerd culture.
Yeah.
Now it's spiraling into, a dark place. And I think mostly having to do with, as you pointed out, social media. I think social media has driven us insane. It's like that episode of Star Trek, The Naked Time.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Oh yeah.
Like some disease is unleashed on the Enterprise, and people are kind of going crazy. And that one ensign locks himself in the engine room, and they're spiraling towards, they're going to crash on the planet. And the one guy's laughing, looking at a brush, and he wrote something. It's weird. And I'm like, that's social media now.
Yeah.
We are being driven mad, little by little, and we have not noticed it. I guess my last question, this will be my last question. And then my question after that is going to be, what didn't I ask, or what would you like to ask?
Yeah.
That's actually the real last question.
Sure.
But my question is, what is the legacy of Attack of the Show?
The legacy of Attack of the Show is The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon. It's The Late Show. It's every podcast that you have now that deals with nerd culture. It's the believe it or not, some of the Paramount Plus network is the legacy of Attack of the Show. We changed the game in that we got the audience up off of the couch and involved through our interactions with them, and I think for the first time allowing that type of feedback.
You couldn't have said it better. I would even say, and other people have said this, if you look at YouTube, there wouldn't be a John Campea or any of those. I believe that all the YouTube, when G4 went off the air, what I believe rose in its ashes were everything on YouTube.
Yeah.
Because what Attack of the Show proved with people like myself and Blair Butler and among others who are not like, look, Morgan Webb was, she was the girl who ran the chat. She wasn't an on-camera host, nor aspired to be. Right? Yeah. Sort of thrust. Kevin Pereira was an intern. Right? Yeah. I mean, he has an incredible, natural talent.
Yes.
For hosting, but what I'm saying is that the people that were on G4 weren't trained to be on television.
Yeah.
Sort of somehow learned to do it, and from the ashes of that is every YouTuber who like talks about pop culture from a place of passion. That I believe is whether it's about comic books, movies, video games, like that is everything on YouTube now. Like basically it's like, Attack of the Show ended and YouTube rose. All these YouTubers rose up in its place and became prominent. They had no on-camera training or, and it didn't matter. You have to come at it from a place of authenticity and passion. And that's what I believe happened.
I look at people like Maude Garrett. Maude would have been an Attack of the Show host,
Well, so many of the people that are doing YouTube shows now could be on whatever. I mean, I feel like most of the casting of the new Attack of the Show or the new G4 network has really just come from YouTube and Twitch streamers. So, okay. And I guess my final question is, is there anything I didn't ask or anything you'd like to add?
When I was at MTV in the late 90s, I remember MTV was in a flux, at a transition, and I asked one of the executives about that, and he said, "We have gone from defining the culture to commenting on the culture," and I think that's kind of was also the arc of G4 and Attack of the Show, where you saw it defined for a brief moment the culture, and then in the end, the very, very end, it came to comment on the culture, and that's kind of when I think you have to get out. And fortunately for us, it was forced to comment rather than by forces that we were not able to control. And I look forward to the new G4 and if it has something new to say and if it can define this culture and who knows, maybe even fix or help heal the divide that we have going on currently.
Dude, you knocked it out of the park with some of these. Like, I'm already in my head, like, ooh, that line and this line. And
I'm a writer-producer, man.
No, I shouldn't be surprised. I think
that's planned. That's not planned.
Some of the best interviews have been done with people who are writers. It's like, and producers, like, just had that inside perspective. So, well, Kevin, thanks for doing this. This is great.
Absolutely, man.
This is awesome.